If you're new here, welcome. I'm Kathy from the Delafield Quilt Company, and I love quilting, and I share the projects I'm working on and how I made them on this channel. For this video, I'm going to be showing how to make block number 2. Block number 2 is part of a summer-long series that I'm doing that's called the Slow Summer Stars Quilt. In this series, I'm going to be sewing a block a week that's centered around the star theme. So there's a couple other videos on my channel that has block 1, and there's also one on how I designed the quilt. So if you want to find out more about this project and the fabric that I'm using, I'll put a link to those videos in the show notes. If you're quilting along, that is awesome. I put a link on our website at delafieldquiltco.com, and the link is located at the top of the website, and it's called Slow Summers Quilt Series. So if you click on that link, it'll take you to a spot where I'm going to put all the cut instruction sheets right on that page, and also a link to the video in case you wanted to watch it again. All right, so let's get started with block number 2. To make block number 2, I have 2 pieces of complementing squares. These are 10-inch squares from the layer cake that I'm using. I also have some of my background fabric here. I do need a lot of background fabric for this overall quilt. So what I did is I just cut some of it down into fat quarters just so it's a little bit easier for me to use when I'm doing block by block. So to make this block, we're going to essentially do 2 techniques. And here's just my sample block. I decided to do a test one before I did the video. And we're essentially going to do no waste flying geese for these blocks that you see here. And then also we're going to do the magic 8 method for making 8 half square triangles at once. And that's these points here. So to get started, we first need to cut some fabric. And I'm going to start with my fabric A, which is this blue and yellow color. And for fabric A, we're going to need 1 6-inch square and 4 2.5-inch squares. So I'm just going to cut my biggest square first. And I'm going to cut a little bit bigger than 6 inches because I want to trim off just to make it a little bit straighter to work with. So I'm just going to go slightly bigger than 6 inches, and then I'm going to trim it down. And then I need to cut my 4 2.5-inch ones. And I got my 4 2.5-inch squares. Now as I'm cutting my blocks, I'm keeping the scraps because I might need those later on in my project or for another project. Okay, now from fabric B, which is this nice yellow color, I need 1 5 1/4-inch square and 4 2 7/8-inch squares. I'm just gonna, like before, cut a little bit bigger than 5 1/4, and then I'm gonna trim off those edges. And then I just need to cut my 2 7/8 in. I'm just going to do 3 inches so I can trim that edge off. And I'll get 3 out of this one, and I'll need to take 1 more from the rest here. Okay, now I've got my 4 2 7/8-inch squares of the yellow. And then from the white, I am going to cut my largest piece, the 6-inch square. And then my next biggest is going to be a 5 1/4-inch square. And then I need a 4 1/2-inch square. Then I need 4 2 7/8-inch squares. And lastly, I need 4 2.5-inch squares. Okay, so I have all my pieces cut. And now let's get started with the sewing. So you're going to need a pencil and a ruler and probably a few pins too. So the first thing I'm going to start with is making the no waste flying geese. I've made these before on the channel, and I've got a video out there too if you want to learn more about those. But basically what I did was I figured out, well, how big do I need the finished flying geese? And then I went from there to do the math to figure out how big of a block I needed for the main block, and then how big I needed the smaller blocks. And when we do this, what's neat about this is basically we start with 1 block and the 4 coordinating blocks. And we're basically going to sew very quickly 4 at a time. To do that, I'm going to first mark on the back of my 2 7/8-inch squares. I'm going to mark a line diagonally going down, and I'm just going to line up my ruler. And actually, I line up my ruler slightly short of the points. That way, because my pencil has a little bit of thickness to that, so I find if I put it right on the points, when I draw my line, it ends up a little bit off. So I started doing that. And I'm just using a pencil. This is not going to be seen, so you could use a pencil or a fabric-friendly pen if you wanted to. And I'm just going to repeat that for all of these blocks here. Okay. And then I'm going to need my 5 1/4 inch squares, one from fabric B and one from the background. And basically I'm going to take the opposite pattern here. And I'm going to line these up diagonally. I'm going to line up 2, one at the bottom, one at the top. And then I need to make sure that these lines are going to be right in line with each other. I am going to put a few pins in here just to make sure this stays secure. And I'm going to repeat that with this one. Again, I'm just putting a few pins in there. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew 1/4 inch from this line on both sides of the line. I'm just going to repeat that for both of these pieces. Then I'll come back and I'll show you the next step. Okay, so I've got these done. It's a little hard to see the stitch line, but I sewed 1/4 inch on each side of the pencil line on both of these. And now what I'm going to do is just cut these right on that pencil line. And now before we sew the next squares on, we just need to press these. I'm going to press them towards the small triangle here. I know that typically we want to try to press away from the light fabric, but I just find it a little challenging to go the other way. You certainly could do what you would prefer if you're going to make this. I'm spraying just a little bit of starch on these just because I want these blocks to be nice and crisp when I'm working with them. Okay, now that I've got these nicely pressed, I am just going to take our last squares and make sure you got the whites with the whites. I'm going to line it up just like we did before, but just one. I'm going to put a pin to keep that in place. And I'm going to repeat that with the other one. Okay, I've got these all pinned. I'm going to do the same thing I did before, and I'm going to sew 1/4 inch on each side of the pencil line. All right, now I've got these sewn with 1/4 inch from the pencil line on each side. And then just like before, I'm going to cut right on that pencil line. And then I'm going to press them, and I'm going to press them towards the small triangle again. And just like that, I have 4 flying geese in that one combination, and then 4 in the other. So these should measure 2.5 inches by 4.5 inches. And they come pretty darn close. I am going to trim off these little dog ears on the end just so I don't have those get in the way down the road. Okay, I've got those flying geese all trimmed up and I'm just going to set them aside. And let's work on the Magic 8 half square triangle. So we're going to need our 2 6-inch squares. And I'm going to start with the white square. And I'm going to use this one to draw the diagonal line. I'm going to draw a diagonal line from corner to corner on one side and then repeat that on the other. Now that I have that drawn, I'm going to just lay it right sides together on top of the other 6-inch square from fabric A. And I'm going to put a few pins in here. Just make sure it doesn't shift on me as I'm sewing. And then to do this, I am going to sew 1/4 inch from the pencil line all the way down both sides and then repeat that for this line as well. Okay, now I've got this sewn 1/4 inch on both sides of the 2 lines. I'm going to cut at the halfway point on both sides here. So I'm going to start by measuring in. I know this is 6 inches. Cut right down the middle. And I'm going to do it again on these other pieces. Same with this one here. And then I'm going to cut right on the pencil line. Then all I need to do is press these. I am going to press to the dark this time, and you should have 8 total half square triangles. And I am using a little starch on these just to make sure my pieces are nice and crisp. Now these finished ones should be 2.5 inches square. I do find doing this method, I do typically have to trim them down a little bit. So I'm just going to go ahead and trim all these so they are 2.5 inch square. All right, now that I've got these all trimmed to 2.5-inch squares, I'm going to arrange this block, which I think is the fun part. So we're going to need our 2.5-inch squares that we cut earlier and our white 4.5-inch square that's going to go right in the center. And I'm going to just lay this out first, and then I'm going to sew it together. That's going to look nice. All right, so I'm just going to sew this together now. I'm going to start with the center piece, sewing that together, and I'll probably sew these pieces together as well, and these two here. And then I will come back and show you what it looks like when it's all done. And here is the finished block. Actually, I'm really pleased with how this one turned out. I think it's really pretty, and I just love those color combinations. So let's take a look at block 1 next to it. In block 1, if you saw the video from before, this is going to kind of be the main block that pulls everything together. And there's going to be a total of, I think, 17 of these, and then I have 18 stars, and this is the first one of the stars. So thank you so much for watching this video. Next week, I'm going to show how to do block 3 of the Slow Summer Star series, so make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the notification. Hope you have a great day.